We all know the details.
Yeah, we
Tell
know the details. So the details of, and obviously, listen, man, I mean, I know it's still tough, like you said, for you at 44 years old to talk about, and I understand that. But the details on how the case, what the thing was that turned this thing around. All of a sudden, we're going to make an arrest. How they found your mom, where they found your mom.
Sure. So where it turned was not only what I said and the fact that they couldn't turn up. Like my father would tell them something, and I'm like, no, that's bullshit because she wouldn't have gone there. Like so, my father, had his lawyers dealing with the cops, and whatever he said, then Messmer would be like, would your mom have gone to Toronto by herself? And I'm like, no. Would your mom no, she wouldn't have done that. No, she wouldn't have thrown her credit cards at him. My father's story was like, she came down, threw credit cards at him, and got in a car at the end of the driveway and left. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Like, that's the story we're going with, bro? And he says it in court.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's a different story when I confront him in a murder in Mansfield. But there was the house was the big turning point, and then the fact that my father wanted to take me out of town on
the house in Erie, Pennsylvania.
The house in Erie, Pennsylvania, because that was, this is 1990. There's no Google. There's no Zillow. It's not easy to find this stuff. And that's when they found that my father had bought a house, tried to get it for cash, bought it for cash to try to get in quicker, asked to move in a month earlier, asked about lowering the basement floor because they contacted the realtor. This is how they figured all this out. And that was when they're like, okay, that's super fucking fishy. And then they're asking me about, like, did your father talk about this house? I was like, no. I'm like, I don't know this house other than what is in his truck and that it's his girlfriend in front of this fireplace. I'm like, they're both Polaroids. They're together. Clearly, it's the same thing. And when I would poke holes in whatever his story was. So what happened is that I'm taken into foster care. I'm having that asthma attack, like I said, at night. At the same time, while I'm having this, they go into the house. So David Messmore gets cooperation with Erie PD. They cross state lines, right? Yeah. That's not an easy thing. You're a cop.
Absolutely.
It's a big
difficult.
deal.
Mm-hmm.
And already his Captain Carnes, has said, if this comes up cold, you're done. Like, that's it. Like, we're screwed. This guy's going to sue us for everything, blah, blah. Again, but he's like, this fucking kid won't leave me alone. I'll take my chances with you, Captain. I won't take my chances with this kid.
Right.
Because I was so convincing, because I was so, as I am now, I'm the same person. And the thing is that they go into the basement, and they're they're looking through the house, and, like, they're not finding anything. And what happened I had told them about my father purchasing some AstroTurf, like indoor-outdoor carpeting, the green shit, whatever.
Yeah.
And it was on our porch for a while, and some tarps and things that were at the house. And I told him they were on our porch. I told Messmore this. So when they went downstairs, they saw this green AstroTurf carpeting. And they're looking around. They're like, fuck, I don't know. And then they smelled like sort of a weird odor, but they're like, I don't know. And then they point the flashlight on the wall, and they see a couple splatters of what they think is cement. And they're like, get the fucking shovels. They rip everything up because it was shelves built and everything. These newly painted shelves. And so it had this weird sort of odor, but everything was painted.
And this is the basement of the new house in Erie.
Erie, Pennsylvania house, the one that I found the photo of. And they rip up the carpeting, and they dig through, and then, they lift it up and they see a grave. And then they dig it up and they pull her body out. And they're like, she's got a plastic bag tied around her neck and the whole thing.
So
my mother was suffocated and bludgeoned to death in the back of her head.
And then driven from Mansfield, Ohio to Erie to this new house your father bought, cut up some concrete,
dropped her in it,
put it, and then try to cover it up.
Yeah. And what conveniently happened, is the girlfriend.
I was just going to ask, was she aware of this? Was she involved?
Uncle, who was partnering with my father on this new business in Erie, Pennsylvania, had conveniently found some leftover concrete dumped on his property and called the police about it.
So he had like a little farm property or some acreage. I do remember that.
So I don't know if this happened. I don't know. Look, there are many people that have these conspiracy theories about all of them being involved and different things like that. And I could go down that rabbit hole if I want. But like at the end of the day, my father caused my mother's murder.
Absolutely.
And committed my mother's murder. Like, there's no doubt in my mind.
And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just going off this.
Sure.
One of the few episodes of Forensic Files, because it's about the forensics. The concrete splatter that you talked about on the wall.
Yes.
Or even the concrete that was used to, cut up,
Sure.
and replace with, and the concrete that was dumped out on this property,
All matched.
they all matched up.
Yep.
I remember there was some forensic deal that was done where they were able to compare the chemicals or however these things were
concrete
made.
content.
They all
they matched up. I do
and so
remember
it was all
that.
circumstantial evidence. So then they found the credit card receipts for the tarp and the AstroTurf, which had been on our porch for a hot minute. I mean, it was purchased months before he murdered
So
my
this
mother.
wasn't a crime of passion.
No, this was not a crime of
well-planned.
passion. And that's the thing when people watch a murder and man stuff they don't get. They're like, oh, yeah, so he killed her. And I was like, no.
This was
I was like, this was premeditated.
in the making.
That's what aggravated murder is premeditated. That's what they call it in Ohio at the time. It's premeditated. So, like, he bought the house, asked about lowering the basement floor, asked about, like, all these things months in advance, bought the torp, rented a jackhammer to, like, my father didn't do labor.
Yeah.
You know, but he had done construction growing up in Philadelphia while he was in school. And because our Italian family had a construction business. So there was like all this stuff. And, you know, he, and then he's super sore and he has all these marks and everything. And it's like, you know, my father was not the most common sense person as far as like what he does, you know, couldn't hardly screw in a light bulb, but like when you're trying to like hire that shit and you're like in that zone, oh yeah, you can do anything for sure.
Yeah, yeah. When you're
it
cover
was
your ass,
it was
panic
circumstantial evidence, and I was able to tie in all of that circumstantial evidence in a time frame, without me knowing that what their time frame was. So everything I told, it just all lined up because I was telling the truth.
What a concept.
What a concept.
What a concept.
All right,
So-
Collier, we got 2 minutes,
2
man.
minutes.
This is a fascinating story. You've talked to your dad since then.
In the film, yeah, I confront him. And he is, you know, he's a sociopath and he is in denial of his guilt. And I'll just tell you real fast, like when I pitched the idea to the Department of Corrections because they wouldn't let us come in, I was like, look, this is an opportunity for my father to admit what he's done, and we will have this big come to Jesus moment. It'll be great. So they thought it was going to be this big thing, and they had their photographer there and all this stuff. I didn't tell them that I also know my father's a sociopath because my father thought that I was going with my friend John Morrissey and all these people to make a film to help him get out of prison. So when he comes in the room in the film, he has a smile on his face. And then I pull out this letter that he had sent back to me when I was 13 years old because here's the thing. I got into the film business and I did everything I did because I wanted to fucking have an answer on why you murdered my mother. I had written him a letter when I was 13 years old, and I asked him to please come clean about murdering my mother. Why are you putting everybody through this? Putting your girlfriend through, it was Sherry at the time, your daughter my father had a daughter, you know, was born 12 days before he was arrested, so I had a half-sister, our whole family. I was like, just tell me the truth. I'm just pleading with you to tell me the truth. And he opened the letter, read it, wrote refuse, and returned to sender and sent it back to me. And I read him that letter in prison, right there in front of him, and I say, why did you send that? And it's just all downhill from there. As soon as I pull that letter out, and I told him, I was like, I've had these questions ever since you murdered my mother, the whole game changes. His whole demeanor drives. And then it's just an hour of conversation. And he's just completely in denial. All these stories, which don't match up. It's insane.
So one last question, Collier. So if I understand it, he still fucking denies doing this.
Yes.
So that's absolutely
Well, he
baffling.
denies, he said that she came at him with a knife. He pushed her. It happened
so-
downstairs. She hit her head on this furniture.
He panicked.
And that he panicked.
Blah,
and
blah,
I was
blah.
like, well, you know, it's suffocation. It was the primary cause of death. I was like, how did she get the plastic bag over her head? Oh, I put the plastic bag over her head. I was like, why did you do that? Oh, because I didn't want to look at her. Yeah, while you were strangling her, you didn't want to look at her? Like, you know what I mean? It's just
like you said, narcissist.
and sociopaths and
And sociopath.
psychopathy, and it's a real thing.